Okay, so I think we've got to be really savvy about what's happened, because it's been a year of revolutionary processes across the Middle East, some of which have gone really, really well, some of which have gone terribly bad, some of which have been used to the advantage of certain interests that I don't think are ones that we support. If you look at what the process begins in Tunisia, they go through a successful ousting of a dictatorship and move on to elections and are in the process of reconstituting a state in the way that they wanted to. In Egypt, a similar process began but was halted when the military regime refused to step down and its forced clashes in the streets with the people against the military regime in some really heroic ways, and they've been fighting for democracy in that country. But there have been other processes as well that haven't been as well noticed or talked about in the American media, because the United States is allies with certain countries, especially in the Gulf. So if you think about the heroic struggle of the Bahraini people against their monarchy, the struggle of the Yemeni people against their dictatorship, even heroically last week, thousands of Saudis came out in protest of the Saudi monarchy. These are not getting reported in the US media as much because we have had long, collusive relationships with those regimes. Cut to regimes that the United States has had antagonistic relationships to. So first we had Libya, in which Gaddafi, a much hated dictator, was toppled, but was then replaced by forces very close to the United States. Now we have arrangements with the Libyan Transitional National Council to set up military outposts for NATO off the coast of Tripoli so that NATO can more heavily police the Mediterranean. Our fear is that a similar process is being, they're attempting to use in other regimes. So there's already talk about toppling the Iranian regime, which is an equally bad regime, which has to go. But it would be a shame if it had to go in the way that it went in Libya, with the implementation of U.S. forces in support of the revolutionary process there. And there's already been some collaboration between the Syrian National Council's leadership and the CIA and the United States in order to support that revolutionary process there. I think it's a very dynamic process. I think the people who are fighting and dying in the streets of Syria are not fighting for the United States, they're fighting for their own liberation and freedom. And I think that because of the ruthlessness and bloodiness of what the Assad regime is doing to the Syrian people, some have concluded that the only way that they can get liberation is if the United States comes in and supports them against the Assad regime. The one thing that we've learned from 10 years of American military intervention in the Middle East has been, wherever U.S. troops go, democracy does not follow. Whenever the United States intervenes, it's always in the interest of the United States foreign policy, and never in the interest of people of the Middle East. Egypt is a really good case in point, because February, March, April, it took the Obama regime a really long time to get behind the processes that were unfolding in Tahrir Square to say, we want the ouster of Mubarak, we should have democratic processes. But they've then spent the last 6 months basically collaborating with SCAF, collaborating with the forces that SCAF has put into power in Egypt to maintain some kind of control over Egypt, because Egypt is just, you know, I guess the language of the day, too big to fail. And in U.S. foreign policy parlance, too big to fail means it would be democratically run by the people against the interests of what the United States foreign policy would be in the region, up to and including destabilizing potentially the best friend that American empire has had in the region, which is the state of Israel, which is doing very nasty things to Palestinians on a very regular basis. I think that many of us are out here because we're part of the Occupy Austin and Occupy Everywhere movement and sentiment that has taken over this country, because we were inspired by things that took place in Tunisia and in Egypt. We have to understand how these processes have developed so that we can support the genuine democratic aspirations of the people, and I think not play into the lie that the United States has used, the 1%, which has told us that they have our best interests at heart when they run the economy, are the same people who tell Iraqis, Afghanis, Egyptians, Libyans that they have their best interests at heart when they come to intervene and meddle in their politics. And we should be really savvy about connecting these two arguments together. The 1% which has wrecked the economy in this country is the same 1% which is wrecking the lives of Arabs and Muslims and Christians all throughout the Middle East. And it is time that we say, I think, unequivocally, that what the people of the Middle East need is an end to U.S. meddling in their politics, an end to U.S. military presence in their countries, left on their own, they have shown us the heroic things that they are capable of doing in order to win real democracy in country after country after country after country. My God, we all wish that there were Tahrir squares here in the United States. We need more occupations. We need to deepen the movement that has existed in the United States, because the best thing that we can do if we want to ensure a democratic Syria, a democratic Yemen, a democratic Egypt, a democratic Libya, a democratic Saudi Arabia, is mass protests here in this country, which shake the leaders of this country to their boots and make them understand that for far too long, the majority of us all around the world have been suffering as the economies have been organized in their interests, wars have been conducted to protect their interests, governments have been arranged to defend their interests, and all of it from top to bottom has got to go. And it's time that we stand, I think, solidly with the sentiment that is the sentiment in Egypt, the sentiment that was in Tunisia, and the slogan that they had was "The people united want an end to the regime," has resonances here too. And I think that it's important to make those connections as we're trying to think about how to support and give solidarity to all of the processes that are unfolding throughout the Middle East. Free, free Syria!
Free, free Syria!
Down with Assad!
Down with Assad!
Free, free Egypt!
Free, free Egypt!
Down with Tantawi!
Down with Tantawi!
Free, free America!
Free, free America!
Down with the 1%!
Down with the 1%!
Free, free Syria!
Free, free Syria!
Down with Assad!
Down with Assad!
My name is Mike. I think there's a few ways in which we could say that there are some real resonances and identification between our struggle here in the U.S. and what is happening right now. First of all, I think it's motivated in large part by, I guess you would say, economic grievances. That is, it's well known that in Tunisia, Egypt, and so forth, that there's an increasing, very sharp divide between rich and poor in those societies that has grown tremendously over the last few years. And just swaths of young, underemployed people, unemployed people, and you know, while the fight in the spring sort of crystallized to ouster a dictator, it was also very much animated by people's desire for economic justice, for jobs, relief, security, and so forth. And I think the last thing that I think we can all really sort of identify with is what happens when you try to assert real democracy from below and what they do to you. People in the Occupy movement are all too familiar about what that looks like. We've seen a vicious crackdown on our encampments over the last 2 weeks for doing what, right? Sleeping in a freaking park, right? They bring out the tear guns, the batons, all the rest of it. People have seen, you know, the images from Oakland and all across the country. If you look at what happened in Egypt just last week, yeah, first of all, if you don't know, 1 million people demonstrated across Egypt on Friday. It wasn't very well reported. I think, you know, it gets lost in the holiday shuffle, but there were massive, massive protests that were blanketed in tear gas. I mean, just the images were horrifying. And we now know, I mean, we always knew where it was coming from because you immediately saw the little twit pic of the maid in Pennsylvania on the tear gas canisters. But because of port workers in Suez, it's now known that the U.S. is basically shipping something on the order of 14 tons of tear gas. So when we say earlier that the U.S. is doing what it can to sort of bolster the military rule and a more conservative vision of Egypt's future, that's what it looks like. And you know, but people, what you may not know is that the protest that started last week actually started in Tahrir, much smaller. It was maybe 1,000 people early last week, and basically it played out exactly the way we've seen things happen in Occupy. It was an encampment to protest the military regime, to call for civilian government, to expand democracy, a smallish group of people, and they were cracked down upon viciously with tear gas, bullets, and all the rest of it. Over 40 people have been killed. So I think you see a similar kind of process unfolding. I think a similar kind of thing that people are thinking about and going through, trying to figure out how to stand up to realize our aspirations. And I'll just end by saying, you know, there's an ongoing debate in our movement. What do we really stand for? Should we restrict our demands to the most limited kinds of things? You know, we're just for calling out the banks, you know, for the things that the role they played in this country the last few years. I think that we've seen these connections that have played out you know, not just between U.S. and Egypt and Syria and Greece and Spain and Italy and on and on. And I think what it means is we have to deepen our analysis. We have to have a deeper understanding of what's going on in the world. This isn't just about, you know, a few bad apples. This is about a whole system of haves and have-nots, of elites and the rest of us. And the rest of us, when we try to stand up for ourselves, get viciously attacked. And so we should take great inspiration from the resilience and the struggle of our brothers and sisters in North Africa and the Middle East and elsewhere, and take inspiration for our struggle. And I'll leave it there. Thanks so much. Occupy Austin, occupy Tahrir, occupy everywhere. Let's fight, let's win.
Down with the 1%.
Down with the 1%, all around the world. Thanks, guys.
Feel it now, feel it here. We will stand with Tahrir. Feel it now, feel it here. We will stand with Tahrir. Feel it now, feel it here. We will stand with Tahrir.
Feel it now, feel it here.
We will stand with Tahrir.
Feel it now, feel it here.
We will stand with Tahrir.
Feel it now, feel it here.
We will stand with Tahrir.
Cairo, Damascus, Austin.
We will fight, we will win.
Cairo, Damascus, Austin.
We will fight, we will win.
Cairo, Damascus, Austin.
We will fight, we will win.
Cairo, Damascus, Austin.
We will fight, we will win.
First, they ignore you. Then they laugh at you. Then they fight you. Then you win.
I heard them say the revolution won't be televised. Al Jazeera proved them wrong. Twitter has them paralyzed.